Russia's origins are entirely different from Ukraine's. Instead of the ancient spiritual and cultural roots of Kievan Rus, it grew from the Grand Duchy of Moscow. For centuries, it was under Mongol rule, absorbing their systems of governance. Instead of Ukrainian or Polish influences, it adopted Mongol and Chinese administrative methods, passed down through the Khan Empire. Language evolution reveals this history vividly. Basic words, like for bull, water, or tree, have remained consistent over centuries. But words of power tell a different story. In Ukrainian, the word for money, rosy, is borrowed from Polish, reflecting Western influences. In Russian, the term is denge, originating from Turkic tanga, a linguistic link shared with Mongol and Chinese origins. The Russian word for treasury, kasna, is directly from Mongol roots. Meanwhile, Ukrainian retains the Old Slavic word skarbnitsia, emphasizing its deep historical ties to its earliest traditions. Vocabulary echoes who controlled whom. When Putin claims Russians and Ukrainians are one people, he's not just being sentimental. He's rewriting history to erase the uncomfortable truth. Russian political culture, unlike Ukraine's Western-oriented traditions, is rooted in Mongol and Chinese imperial legacies. Conquering Ukraine becomes a game of theft, stealing its historical legitimacy to hide Russia's own imperial past. In July 2021, Putin authored a lengthy essay denying Ukraine's right to independence. He claimed Ukrainian identity was fabricated by foreign powers, and modern Ukraine was a tool to weaken Russia. The University of Rochester fact-checked these assertions, finding most claims exaggerated or false. But facts never mattered much in wars over narratives. For Russia's ruling class, losing Ukraine isn't just about geopolitics. It's about losing their very sense of identity. Ukraine's independence threatens to dismantle what they believe is Russia's true historic essence. It's a challenge to the narrative of a mighty empire. The stakes are high. To understand why Russia insists on control, we must see that this isn't just about land or power, it's about the soul of a nation. A nation that's fighting to preserve its history, its identity, and its future against a rising tide of global change. What happens if a country with such deep roots in the West is edged out? Could the secrets of its past unleash a new conflict? The answers lie buried in the echoes of history, stories of conquest, resilience, and the fight over who gets to define the future. Russia and Ukraine share a complex history rooted in disputed narratives and conflicting identities. For Russia, the loss of Ukraine would mean the unraveling of its deepest sense of self. As Dmitry Trainin once explained, losing Ukraine threatens to fragment Russia's core. It would tear apart the notion that Russia is the rightful successor to the ancient state of Kievan Rus. If Ukraine becomes an independent, thriving nation aligned with Western powers, it would shatter the myth that Russia is its natural heir. Instead, it would expose the brutal truth: Russia's identity is founded on conquest, not cultural heritage. For decades, Russia has acted like an immense gas station, fueling its economy with oil and gas. In the mid-2010s, nearly half of the country's budget came from fossil fuel exports. But the world is changing fast. The global shift away from fossil fuels is intensifying. By 2035, the European Union plans to sell only electric cars. The European nations are determined to sever reliance on Russian energy altogether. Meanwhile, China pushes ahead with the Belt and Road project to secure Middle Eastern oil and gas, bypassing Russia entirely. As climate policies tighten, Russia's once vital exports are shrinking. Russia's economic model, dependent on oil and gas, is dying. It has failed to diversify its industries or find new sources of wealth. That's where Ukraine's rare resources come into focus. This country is sitting on some of the planet's most valuable natural deposits. It boasts the 8th largest coal reserve worldwide and the 2nd largest in Europe, over 38 billion tons of coal. But here's the twist: more than 90% of that coal is in the Donbas region, the same territory Russia craves since 2014. Even more lucrative are Ukraine's mineral deposits. The country holds extensive iron ore reserves, about a quarter the size of Russia's, stored in a much smaller, more accessible area with better infrastructure. Additionally, Ukraine is rich in manganese, nickel, and chromium, metals crucial for modern manufacturing. Yet, the most critical assets are lithium and rare earth elements. As the green energy revolution accelerates, lithium is becoming the new oil. Electric vehicles depend heavily on lithium batteries, and the entire transition to renewable energy hinges on rare earth metals. Ukraine's untapped lithium deposits, coupled with a sophisticated metallurgical industry, give it the potential to become a key player in the global market. By contrast, Russia has minimal lithium reserves and an industrial base that's outdated and inefficient. This contrast is vital. If Ukraine manages to develop and export these resources, especially with Western investment and European integration, it could emerge as a strategic leader. Meanwhile, Russia risks fading into irrelevance. But there's more at play. Ukraine's natural gas reserves are estimated at around 1.1 trillion cubic meters officially. Some intelligence reports suggest actual reserves could be nearly 5 times higher, up to 5.4 trillion cubic meters, primarily beneath the Black Sea and in the Donbas region. Both areas are key targets of Russian aggression. Control over these reserves could allow Russia to dominate Ukraine's energy future and decide which nations will hold leverage in the new century's economy. This fierce struggle over resources echoes history's most brutal conflicts, where access often determined the victors. The question remains, who will control the vital assets shaping the future economy? And what will happen if Ukraine, with its wealth of Earth's treasures, manages to break free and forge its own destiny? The stakes could not be higher, and the outcome could redefine global power for decades to come. The world's most powerful manufacturing nation, China, views Russia not as an equal partner but as a vital resource outpost. It relies on Russian energy and raw materials to keep its factories running and fuel its green revolution. The key to global dominance now hinges on control of rare earth metals and industrial minerals, resources buried within Ukraine. If Russia seizes Ukraine, China obtains indirect access to these precious supplies through Moscow's influence. It's a strategic move to secure dominance in the future economy. But if Ukraine remains independent and aligns with Western allies, China's grip loosens, risking the loss of vital resources. That's why China pushes tirelessly for a peace agreement that lets Russia keep its occupied territories. To China, Putin's ambitions and Russian nationalism are secondary. It's all about control, power over the materials that will shape the world's green energy future. A victory for Russia, even partial, would allow Moscow to dominate the Black Sea coast and Donbas, holding a treasure trove of minerals. This gives China a powerful indirect hold, securing essential resources without direct confrontation. For Putin, this situation is a dangerous game. If Russia falls short and loses Ukraine, it becomes dependent on China, its energy cheaply discounted and its influence diminished. But if Russia wins and controls Ukraine's resource-rich regions, it gains leverage, a bargaining chip to maintain some independence from Beijing's growing power. This is Russia's last hope, a chance to steer the course of the century's resource battles. Yet beneath all these calculations lies something deeper, an unwavering sense of empire. Russia's identity is built on conquest, on unparalleled control. Without Ukraine's lands, Russia fears its very essence will collapse, diminished, disarmed, and diminished to a failed relic. This unstoppable desire to reclaim what it believes is Russian land is what keeps the war going, regardless of the cost, regardless of the truth. The question remains, can Russia's imperial obsession truly be stopped? Russia has been an empire for over 3 centuries. From Peter the Great's territorial expansions to the Soviet Union's domination of Eastern Europe, Russia's identity has been rooted in conquest and control. During the brief window after 1991, when Russia wasn't aggressively expanding, it was seen as a strange anomaly, a weakness to be fixed. For Putin, growing up deeply embedded in the Soviet system and trained in the secret police, the message was clear: Russia's greatness depends on its land, its borders, its ability to dominate. He truly believes that a Russia confined within its current borders is a diminished, humiliated nation. His history of meddling and invasions reveals a disturbing pattern. In 2008, Russia invaded Georgia, backing separatist regions in Abkhazia and South Ossetia. This move was designed to prevent Georgia from joining NATO, since alliance rules block countries embroiled in active conflicts or territorial disputes. Russia used this loophole to keep Georgia out, ensuring its Western integration would never happen. But Ukraine presents a different challenge, a prize unlike any other. It's the crown jewel of the ancient Russian Empire. Bigger, wealthier, more populous, and more strategically vital than nearly all the Soviet republics except Russia itself. For Putin, controlling Ukraine isn't just about geopolitics, it's about restoring an empire. If he can bring Ukraine under Russian influence, he proves that Russia's imperial legacy still lives. If he fails, the entire vision collapses, and the empire dies. This obsession explains the language Putin used, comparing his invasion to the catastrophic battles of World War II, claiming he's fighting against fascism. But the truth is more sinister. He isn't fighting Nazis. He's fighting to claim that Russia is still a world power, that its imperial reach remains intact, and that Moscow can still dictate terms to its neighbors. Yet Ukraine refuses to bow. A nation Putin branded artificial, a state he insisted was a Western invention, has instead come together in fierce resistance. The ethnic Russians and Russian speakers in eastern Ukraine, whom he expected to welcome Russian troops, have rallied to defend Ukraine's independence. The fight for Ukraine is now a battle for Russia's imperial soul, a clash of identities, legacies, and hopes for the future. After years of relentless conflict, Putin's plans are crumbling before his eyes. He assumed Ukraine would quickly fold, overwhelmed and divided. He believed Russia's military was unmatched, and Western allies would stay silent. But every assumption has shattered utterly. Ukraine stands resilient, defying expectations, and Western support remains unwavering. But here's the shocker, Putin cannot bring this war to a close. Not now. After 3 grueling years, Russia's casualties top 1.3 million. Its economy is battered, strangled by military spending and global sanctions. The leader has staked his entire future on victory. Admitting defeat means admitting failure, catastrophic for his legacy. He's built a fragile empire of loyal security leaders and industry magnates. Many have thrived, profiting from the endless war. For them, Putin is the figure restoring Russia's imperial greatness. If he pushes for peace and faces betrayal, they might turn against him. The risk is real, history proves this. In 1991, the KGB top brass nearly toppled Gorbachev, fearing betrayal. The same pattern looms again. If Putin shows weakness, his closest allies could oust him. Economically, Russia faces a trap. The entire system now depends on war. Defense spending skyrocketed to 40% of the federal budget by 2025. The majority of the economic benefits flow into weapons factories, military infrastructure, and military families. These supporters need the conflict to persist. Without it, the economy would collapse, turning supporters into enemies. Russia even admits the war cannot continue indefinitely at this level. Budgets are already being cut for 2026. Negotiation? Putin's strategy reveals his desperation. He's boxed in, with no way out. Victory is the only option he sees, yet, every day, the costs grow heavier. Will he risk everything to cling to power, or finally embrace a devastating compromise? The truth lies beneath his hollow promises and empty threats. The question remains, how long can the lie last? The real reason Russia launched this devastating invasion is sheer desperation. Once a mighty empire, it now teeters on the brink of collapse. Its economy is crumbling, its leadership aging and increasingly isolated. The ruler believes that conquest can restore its lost greatness. But the harsh truth remains hidden, this conflict is far from over. Its roots run deep in a history of illusions, greed, and survival instincts that refuse to die. Russia's military has shown signs of systemic corruption and inefficiency. Despite boasting nuclear weapons and a formidable air force, its forces struggle with logistical nightmares and morale issues. The economy, once bolstered by oil and gas exports, has become increasingly dependent on China, an economic strategy of survival, not strength. The world has watched as Russia's claims to global dominance crumble before their eyes, revealed as hollow bravado built on threats and nuclear posturing. Behind the scenes, the true motive lies in fear. Russia's leaders are afraid of losing what's left of their influence, their resources, and their historical narrative. Modern Ukraine, vibrant, resilient, and deeply connected to its own identity, threatens to expose the myth of Russian imperial destiny. Putin's quest for control isn't driven solely by geopolitics, it's personal, primal, and rooted in a desperation to cling to relevance before history forgets them all. The war might seem like a conflict between borders and ambitions, but beneath it all lurks a fragile empire's dying gasp. Will Putin's fears push him further into madness? Or can Ukraine's resilience and international support finally turn the tide? As the dust settles, one thing is certain, the true battle is for survival, of nations, identities, and perhaps even the very soul of Russia itself. The conclusion isn't written yet. But one thing's clear, as the world watches, a desperate, aging empire stakes everything on a war that might destroy it entirely. The question remains, how much longer can this deadly game of survival go on? And what will be left of Russia when it finally ends? Russia didn't just invade Ukraine, it deceived the world. Behind the scenes, there's a much darker story. It's not about protecting Russian speakers, fighting NATO, or denazification as they claim. These are just shiny cover stories, distractions created by propaganda to hide deeper truths. Why did they really march into Ukraine? What is the hidden motive? For years, official narratives painted NATO expansion or safeguarding ethnic Russians as the main cause. They showed images on state TV, pompous declarations, polished speeches, endless coverage. Some viewers around the globe even bought into the illusion. But the reality is far more sinister. Behind the bright facade, the true reasons are rooted in fear, economic agony, and a crumbling empire desperately craving relevance. Russia's actions reveal a struggle for control over its identity and future, hidden beneath patriotic slogans. To understand what is truly at stake, we must travel back in time. Over 1,000 years ago, a powerful medieval state existed around Kiev. Known as Kievan Rus, it was a hub of cities governed by East Slavic princes who embraced Eastern Orthodoxy. This realm is seen as the ancient foundation of Eastern European civilization. For centuries, both Russian and Ukrainian leaders have claimed this heritage. But the story splits here, in a crucial way. Today's Ukrainian identity flows directly from Kievan Rus. It evolved through centuries of separate development under Polish and Lithuanian rule, shaping their language, culture, and traditions. In contrast, Russia's roots are different, centered around the Grand Duchy of Moscow. It was shaped by Mongol domination and later absorbed Chinese and nomadic influences, not Western traditions. Words tell stories just as much as history. Ukrainian words for money come from Polish, and their language retains ancient Slavic roots. Russian words, on the other hand, often trace back to Turkic, Mongol, or Chinese origins, reflecting a different cultural lineage. When Putin claims Russians and Ukrainians are one people, he's rewriting history. It's not just ideology, it's an attempt to erase Ukraine's distinct identity, to claim that both nations share a common birthplace rooted in Russian imperial myth. In 2021, Putin penned a lengthy essay claiming Ukraine's independence is artificial, created by foreign powers to weaken Russia. But no facts support this. It's a deliberate distortion, an effort to justify the ongoing conflict. Russia's ruling class sees Ukraine's independence as an existential threat. If Ukraine thrives while aligned with the West, it exposes the falsehood of Russia's claim as the true heir of Kievan Rus. Instead, it reveals Russia's imperial ambition as based on conquest, not cultural legitimacy. Meanwhile, Russia's economy hinges on fossil fuels, oil, gas, coal, that the world is abandoning. Climate policies and green energy initiatives threaten Russia's main source of wealth. The European Union aims to become energy independent, and other nations are developing alternatives. Meanwhile, Ukraine sits atop some of the world's largest reserves of coal, iron, and crucial metals like lithium, materials vital for the ongoing green revolution. Lithium, in particular, has become the new oil. Electric vehicles need it. Rockets and batteries depend on rare earth metals. Ukraine's rich deposits could make it an energy and mineral powerhouse. Russia, with minimal reserves and outdated infrastructure, risks falling behind. Control over Ukraine's natural resources is more than economic, it's strategic. With just a few regions, like Donbass or the Black Sea, Russia can access billions of dollars worth of gas and minerals. If they take full control, they could dominate the upcoming century's most vital supplies. But the crisis runs deeper, another issue looming over Russia's future. Its population is shrinking rapidly. Before the fall of the Soviet Union, fertility rates hovered around enough to sustain the population. Yet the tumult of the 1990s struck hard. Birth rates plummeted, and the population has been steadily declining since. Today, Russia's population has shrunk by almost 7 million people. Future projections say it could fall by a third or more in the coming decades. An aging population, fewer young adults, these are the real threats. Fewer people mean fewer soldiers, workers, and thinkers. Putin's policies worsen the crisis. Strict immigration laws limit newcomers, especially those not fitting the ideal Russian identity, ethnically, linguistically, religiously. The flow of migrants has slowed dramatically, shrinking the nation's diversity and workforce. Now, consider Ukraine. With a population of around 41 million, it's dense, more than 70 people per square kilometer. It's a diverse land of Ukrainians and Russians, sharing language, history, and culture. Nearly all of them are connected to Russia's identity, rooted in the same ancient past. As conflict consumes this land, its natural riches, its people, Russia's true aim becomes clearer. It's not just about territory or politics. It's about controlling the very foundation of future power, resources, identity, and legacy. And as the world watches, the question remains, who will be left to decide the future? Russia's war effort is not just about borders or political slogans. At its core, it's about controlling priceless resources the world is racing to acquire. Ukraine's rich mineral deposits are a game changer. The country holds the world's 8th largest coal reserves and the 2nd largest in Europe, over 38 billion tons, mostly in the Donbass region, the exact territory Russia has coveted since 2014. But the true prize lies beneath Ukraine's surface, rare earth metals, lithium, and vital minerals. Ukraine is sitting on untapped reserves of lithium, a metal essential for the green energy revolution. Every electric vehicle relies on lithium batteries. The entire transformation to renewable energy hinges on these resources. In contrast, Russia's lithium reserves are scant, and its industrial base is outdated, sluggish, and inefficient. This disparity is monumental, because Russia's entire economy depends on fossil fuels, which are declining rapidly as global markets shift. Meanwhile, Ukraine's hidden treasures could power the next century of industry with strategic investments. Imagine the stakes. Ukraine's mineral wealth could turn it into an economic powerhouse, especially if backed by Western support and integration into the European Union. Its deposits of iron ore, manganese, nickel, chromium, all industry essentials, are massive, with the 2nd largest reserves of iron ore in Europe. Yet, it's the rare earth metals like lithium and the untapped natural gas reserves that are most critical. Officially, Ukraine's gas holdings total about 1.1 trillion cubic meters. But hidden reports suggest the real figure could be up to 5.4 trillion cubic meters, most of this in the Donbass and under the Black Sea, areas Russia has already attacked. Control over these reserves means control over future power dynamics. Russia's military campaigns are as much about resource domination as they are about territorial conquest. If Russia seizes these territories, it could control nearly 80% of Ukraine's gas supplies, giving it leverage over Europe and beyond. This relentless pursuit echoes history, wars driven by resource control that reshape the global order. But the crisis doesn't stop there. Beneath the surface of geopolitics, another sinister reality emerges. Russia is rapidly losing its population. Back in 1989, before the Soviet Union collapsed, the fertility rate was around 2.01 children per woman, a stable number. But chaos struck in the 1990s as the Soviet system disintegrated. The birth rate plummeted to astonishing lows, hitting just 1.16 children per woman, with over 7 million Russians disappearing from their homeland by 2022. The population is shrinking at an alarming pace, and projections suggest it could fall by half in the coming decades. Why does this matter? Because a declining population means a shrinking workforce, fewer soldiers, less innovation. Putin's government has worsened the crisis by restricting immigration, fiercely prioritizing ethnic Russians and Slavs, further shrinking the pool of new citizens. From nearly 1.15 million legal immigrants in 1994, the number has dropped to just 70,000 by 2004. The result? Russia's future is shrinking right before our eyes. But here's the shocking part: the invasion of Ukraine isn't just about land or influence. It's about safeguarding the very survival of Russian identity. By controlling Ukraine, its land, its resources, Russia seeks to exist as a great power. Without Ukraine, Putin believes Russia's very legacy and future are at stake. This obsession has driven a war fueled by fear of fading into obscurity, of becoming irrelevant in the modern world. And if all these reasons aren't enough, the stakes escalate even further. Russia's strategic goal is to dominate resources vital for the energy-intensive future. They're fighting not just for land but for the future lifeblood of industries worldwide. The question is, why are these battles shaping the fate of nations? Because in the end, it all comes down to one truth: who controls the resources, controls the future. Countries matter most in shaping the world in the 21st century. Throughout history, control over nations has sparked endless conflicts. Now, a new crisis emerges. The core of Putin's desperation is far more alarming than many realize. Russia is losing its own population. Before the Soviet Union's collapse in 1989, Russia's fertility rate hovered just above replacement level, about 2.01 children per woman. That number meant a stable population. But by the 1990s, chaos swept the nation. The economy shattered, institutions crumbled, and something tragic happened. Birth rates plunged. They sank to a staggering low of 1.16 children per woman. For over a decade, it stayed below 1.4. Imagine this: Russia's population shrank from 148 million in 1991 to just 137 million in 2022. That's a loss of over 7 million people. And the decline isn't slowing, it's accelerating. The United Nations warns Russia's population could plummet to between 74 and 112 million by century's end. That's a potential loss of 25 to 50% in just 75 years. Compare that to the world's overall decline of only 20%. But the crisis deepens. The decline in birth rates during the 1990s and early 2000s created a yawning gap among the young. Russia now faces a stark shortage of people in their 20s and 30s, those most capable of starting families and building the future. The numbers are terrifying. Fewer young people mean fewer future parents. And fewer parents mean even fewer children, feeding a destructive cycle. Instead of addressing this crisis with migration, Putin made it worse. He imposed strict restrictions on immigration during the 2000s, targeting race, religion, and language. The law of 2002 was especially harsh. It limited legal entry, and although some loosened rules appeared in 2005, Putin made it clear, priority would go to Russian speakers. Immigration peaked at 1.15 million in 1994. From that high, numbers sharply declined. By 2004, just 70,000 new arrivals entered each year. Why? Because Putin's goal was clear: sustain Russia as an ethnically Slavic, Orthodox nation. He fears that welcoming outsiders will dilute this identity. The focus is on people who resemble Russians, who speak like Russians, think like Russians. And here's where Ukraine enters the picture. Ukraine's population once was nearly 41 million. Close in culture and language, and historically tied to Russia's own roots. But Ukraine is truly dense, 70 people per square kilometer, compared to Russia's less than 9. It's a land rich in natural resources, sitting on vast coal, mineral, and energy deposits. Among its treasures are huge reserves of iron ore, manganese, and lithium, the critical metals needed for future technology and green energy. As the world moves away from fossil fuels and shifts to electric vehicles and renewable power, Ukraine's resources become priceless. The country's untapped lithium deposits could fuel global industries. Meanwhile, Russia's economy remains heavily dependent on energy exports. It's like a gas station masquerading as a nation. But the world is changing. European nations are rapidly shedding their reliance on Russian energy. China is building new routes for Middle Eastern resources. Russia's main economic pillar is cracking apart. Ukraine's natural resources pose a survival threat to Russia. Control over these assets grants immense power in shaping the future. That's one reason why conflict persists. The resources are worth fighting for. Whoever controls Ukraine's energy and minerals will decide which nations are dominant in the coming decades. But perhaps even more alarming is what's happening to Russia from within. The country is losing its people. Long before the conflict, fertility rates had fallen drastically. In the late 1980s, about 2 children per woman kept the population steady. But in the chaos of the 1990s, fertility plunged to 1.16 children, well below replacement. The impact is devastating. Russia's population shrank from nearly 150 million to about 137 million today. An enormous loss of over 7 million people. The trend is worsening faster than ever. Predictions warn that by the end of the century, Russia's population could drop to as low as 75 million, losing half of its current size. This decline isn't just numbers. It creates a huge gap among young adults. The current generation of 20 and 30-year-olds is vastly smaller than before. That means fewer future parents, fewer workers, fewer people to sustain the nation. The cycle feeds itself: less population, less growth, more decline. Putin's response was to tighten migration controls. In the 2000s, he enacted laws that made it harder for outsiders to enter. Immigration was restricted by race, religion, language. The law of 2002 was especially severe. In 2005, he slightly relaxed rules, but only for Russian speakers. The result? Immigration shrank sharply. From an annual peak of over 1 million in the mid-1990s to just a few tens of thousands today. Putin's goal was to preserve Russia's identity, ethnically, culturally, and religiously. Only those who fit his vision could enter freely. And Ukraine? A thorn in that vision. Nearly 41 million people once called Ukraine their home. Most are culturally and linguistically close to Russia. About 90% of Ukrainians are either Ukrainians or Russians. Ukraine's high population density, 70 people per square kilometer, makes it even more vital. The fight over Ukraine isn't just about land. It's about control over resources that shape the fate of nations. Russia's internal weakness and Ukraine's strategic wealth threaten Putin's vision of a powerful, unified Russian empire. The stakes couldn't be higher. Russia's aggressive stance goes far beyond just borders or political claims. At its core, it's a fight over priceless resources that the entire world desperately needs. Ukraine's mineral wealth is a game changer, holding the world's 8th largest coal reserves and the 2nd largest in Europe, over 38 billion tons. Most of this is in the Donbas region, precisely the territory Russia has craved since 2014. But the real prize lies just beneath Ukraine's surface: rare earth metals, lithium, and other vital minerals. The country sits on vast untapped deposits of lithium, an essential metal powering the green energy revolution. Every electric vehicle runs on lithium batteries. The entire shift towards renewable energy depends on access to these resources. In stark contrast, Russia's lithium reserves are minimal, and its industry is outdated and sluggish. This disparity is staggering because Russia's economy is still heavily reliant on fossil fuels, oil and gas, that are rapidly losing global demand. As Europe and other regions pivot away from carbon-based energy, Russia's primary export is shrinking fast. Meanwhile, Ukraine's hidden mineral riches could sustain future industries with strategic investments. Imagine Ukraine transforming into an economic powerhouse, powered by Western support and integration into the European Union, thanks to its mineral wealth. Ukrainian deposits of iron ore, manganese, nickel, and chromium are enormous. It boasts the second largest reserves of iron ore in Europe, vital for steel production and industry. But what truly upgrades Ukraine's strategic value are its potential in rare earth metals like lithium and the enormous natural gas reserves beneath its land and sea. Officially, Ukraine's natural gas reserves are around 1.1 trillion cubic meters. Yet, secret reports suggest the real amount could be up to 5.4 trillion cubic meters, most located in the areas Russia has already attacked, like the Donbas and Black Sea zones. Control over these resources means wielding immense power. If Russia gains control of these regions, it could dominate nearly 80% of Ukraine's gas supplies, leverage that could influence Europe's energy future and reshape global alliances. History shows us that wars driven by resource control redefine the world order. The ongoing conflict isn't just about land, it's about grabbing the future's lifeblood. But beneath these visible conflicts lies a darker crisis. Russia is losing its own population at an alarming rate. Back in 1989, before the Soviet Union collapsed, the fertility rate hovered around 2.01 children per woman, enough to maintain a stable population. But during the chaos of the 1990s, that number crashed to just 1.16 children per woman. Over 7 million Russians simply vanished from their homeland by 2022. The population shrinks faster each year, with projections suggesting Russia could lose up to half of its population in the next 70 years. Why does this matter? Because a shrinking population equals a shrinking workforce, fewer soldiers, less innovation, and a nation losing its vitality. Putin's government has worsened this crisis by restricting immigration, focusing strictly on ethnic Russians and Slavs, further limiting the flow of new citizens. Immigration plummeted from 1.15 million in 1994 to only 70,000 in 2004. Russia's future, it seems, is withering away. Here's the shocking truth: the invasion of Ukraine isn't just about territory or influence. It's about survival, preserving Russia's identity at any cost. By controlling Ukraine's land and resources, Russia aims to secure its place as a great power. Without Ukraine, Putin fears Russia's legacy will be forever diminished, its relevance lost. All these reasons, power, resources, identity, fuel this relentless war. It's driven by a desperate need to prevent fading into obscurity. Because ultimately, the battle isn't just over land. It's over the future itself. Control over vital resources, energy, minerals, dictates who will lead in the years to come. The outcome of this conflict could shape the world for decades, or even centuries. Who controls these treasures will define who rules the future.